So Jack Catterall just defeated Harlem Eubank by a technical decision after 6 completed rounds, as the fight was stopped after an accidental head clash that caused deep cuts above the eye of both men. This was a very boring fight and a lackluster performance from both men. Catterall was definitely the rightful winner though, by the way. But the most noteworthy moments in this fight were the incidents outside of the boxing rule set that took place. And I'm glad the fight ended when it did, as I didn't see the fight going anywhere at all. We were in for 6 more boring and frustrating rounds if the two men's nuts didn't smash into each other. In the post-fight interview, Catterall tried to make out like he would have picked up the action from that point if the fight wasn't stopped there, but nah, it would have kept going how it was for another 6 rounds. Look, I had a decent amount of sleep and I woke up well into the afternoon, and I was still almost dozing off by the second round. Oof, Maron, that was terrible. Jack Catterall tends to be boring anyway. His last fight, that loss to Arnold Barboza, was so boring. Barely any clean shots landed. Barboza landed some rights to the body here and there and just caught Catterall with the last jab at the end of a 1-2-1, and that was enough for Barboza to comfortably outland Catterall from what I saw. But that was Barboza. There's levels. This time, Catterall was fighting Harlem Eubank, Harlem who has never fought at world level before. So Harlem wouldn't know how to deal with Catterall, and that's how we saw it play out in the ring. Harlem Eubank had no clue how to deal with Catterall. Catterall has a boring style, so that just made for a joke of a fight. Harlem Eubank is used to rushing into range against a lower level of competition, but he wouldn't get away with it against Catterall. As a result, Harlem was just desperately trying to give Catterall different looks to try and disguise his entry into range, but this was to no avail, and Harlem ended up looking quite silly to be frank, jittering and bouncing around and not being able to find a way to land any shots. And yeah, Catterall was just boring anyway. Likes to frustrate his man, darts out of range to avoid attacks a lot of the time, and looks to nick rounds by just landing the odd counters here and there. So yeah, that was just a boring and cagey affair. As for the messiness in there, when you've got someone desperately jumping into range so much like Harlem was, there will be a lot of clinching. But Catterall ain't the cleanest fighter himself. Ducks below the waist at times, leads forwards and smothers when he slips punches, and we've seen him tie opponents up quite a bit. And in clinch situations, whether it's initiated by him or his opponent, Catterall loves keeping a hold, doesn't he? We saw 2 proper wrestling sequences in that fight, didn't we? First in round 3 when Harlem ducked below the waist in close, Catterall grabbed Harlem's waist. Harlem tried to posture up all strong to shrug Catterall off, but as Catterall lost balance and went down, he kept a hold of Harlem's waist on the way down to cause Harlem to drop to the ground too, but Harlem styled it out with a backwards roll. A real fluent pro wrestling type exchange there, something you'd see on Ring of Honor. No, what kind of a reference is that? Second one of these in round 6, it looks like Harlem literally took him down and Catterall had a hold of Harlem on the way down. Who knows just how they went to ground though, the camera angle change makes it very unclear. But as for the fight's end, yeah, they do say head clashes are common in orthodox versus southpaw affairs, but this one was brutal, left both guys sliced up. And Harlem did come in very careless with the head to be honest. But Catterall leant forward with his head a bit too as Harlem rushed in, so they're both at fault here, but Harlem is more so at fault. Catterall was gushing blood straight away and looked to the ref and started to complain, but I found it funny how Harlem just kept going for it after and landed a shot to the back of the head. Not that I like dirty stuff at all, but in a fight this rubbish, these are the highlights. Everything got awkward from here. Catterall went back to his corner without any permission right after the cut opened, then the referee had to bring Catterall back to centre ring to resume the action. Only significant moment for the remainder of the round after the cut was, what do you know, Catterall shoving Harlem to the ground. Another wrestling exchange there. So yeah, round 6 ended and Catterall's cut looked terrible. Harlem's cut wasn't pretty at all either. And whether or not the fight would enter round 7 was up in the balance as the doctor checked Catterall's cut. Well, Catterall's corner is what the broadcast was focused on. And weirdly, the doctors allowed Catterall to continue. They deemed his cut, appropriate to fight on with. But apparently, it was Harlem's cut that urged the ringside doctors to tell the ref to stop the fight. But I think the ref officially said that the fight was stopped due to both men's cuts. Harlem's cut was pretty bad too, by the way. Don't let the pundits and that make out like his one was nothing. After the fight was waved off, Harlem Eubank started celebrating as if he won the fight, which was embarrassing because Catterall clearly won, let's be honest. You maybe give Harlem Eubank, 1 round in there. It took ages for it to be confirmed that the fight would be going to the cards, and the commentary team were acting all confused, even though I don't see what else would happen in that situation. But when it did go to the cards, Catterall did get the decision, and rightfully so. But I have no idea why the judges scored 7 of the rounds when round 7 literally did not start. Obviously it don't matter because Catterall won by a wide gap anyway, he was definitely the winner. But how do you decide who to score a round to when the round literally didn't happen? The same thing happened in Ben Whittaker vs Liam Cameron 1 back last October. They toppled over the rope at the end of round 5, which resulted in the fight's finish, so round 6 did not start. But the judges scored 6 of the rounds. So yeah, when an incident like this happens right at the end of the round, they always say that the fight officially ended 1 second into the next round, so they can score the next round for some reason. I'm a little casual who hasn't read the rule books, of course, so I'm sure there is a reason for this that I'm just oblivious to, but whatever that reason is, it makes no sense anyway. Surely all that matters is that 4 of the rounds are complete. And it's not like in these situations the fight got stopped midway through the round so they have to score a partially completed round. They're just starting 1 second of the next round to score an extra round that doesn't even take place. That's just so regarded. Also, as for the scorecards, I love how David Diamante botched the announcement of the winner. The vacant WBA International Welterweight title was on the line, and Harlem Eubank's IBF Intercontinental Welterweight title was also on the line. So after reading how the judges scored the fight, David Diamante is meant to say, he is now the WBA International Welterweight Champion, and he is the new, or he is still, the IBF Intercontinental Welterweight Champion. The IBF one is the reveal in this case, as it is held by one of the contestants, so you've got to separate it from the vacant belt in the announcement. Come on now, why should a little punk like me be correcting these professionals who Matchroom pay good money to? It's like referee Marcus McDonald who Matchroom love, always waving his hands in the air to say no knockdown when a guy slips. But he's meant to wave down for that. Waving up indicates stopping the fight. He does it all the time as well. We just saw him do it in the Joe Cordina fight and all, the co-main event of the Catterall Eubank card. But yeah, after David Diamante said, and new WBA International Champion, the ref actually raised Harlem's hand and Harlem thought that he won briefly. But then when David Diamante said, and IBF Intercontinental Champion as a follow-up from and new, Harlem was like, wait what? That's my belt. So then he kind of realised that he lost. Harlem Eubank thinking that he won the fight is laughable, of course, based on how the fight played out, but the confusion here is understandable based on the botched announcement from David Diamante. Diamante's dreadlocks must be cutting off the blood circulation to his brain or something. Anyway, Jack Catterall was back on the win column. Yay! He's bounced back from that loss to Arnold Barboza, and he's got a decent level win in his welterweight debut over Eubank that would do good for his welterweight rankings. Well, not debut, let's say this is Catterall's first ranked fight at welterweight, as he did have a little welterweight fight or two back in the day at a lower level. Of course, Catterall has 2 contender belts at 147 now, so he is liable to go for gold next. But let's have it right. Who wants to see this guy fight again? He stinks the place out every time, and I'm actually sick of seeing this guy in main events. This is my limit now. He doesn't push the action at all and his fights are just so uneventful. Look, I'm not going to get all volatile as an emotional reaction to one fight just because I did not enjoy it, especially given that I have backed Catterall in the past, and I'm not going to be a hater and start wishing for the guy to never get a payday in boxing again. But objectively speaking, after this one, surely it's time for Eddie Hearn to stop building cards around this guy just to get ticket sales off of Catterall's little fan base in Chorley and in and around Manchester, because it's hurting the quality of the Matchroom product. Because this was actually a pretty decent card all round, but it's ended on such a sour note, and this fight was Matchroom's first main event since their little rebrand. So Eddie Hearn has put Jack Catterall in headline after headline lately, and his last 3 fights were headliners in Manchester, so Jack Catterall was definitely a guy that Eddie's focused on promoting. Eddie Hearn probably originally signed Catterall off of the hype of Catterall getting robbed in the first Josh Taylor fight, when Catterall challenged for the undisputed title. And yeah, he got him the big Josh Taylor rematch last year, which Catterall did win. But when Catterall got his WBO interim title shot against Arnold Barboza, a fight that would have got Catterall a big world title shot against Teofimo Lopez, Catterall bottled it in a stinker and just didn't do enough. And now he was just in his second complete stink hit in a row. So let's at least relegate the guy to an undercard next up. With the backlash to this fight and how much everyone is saying that Jack Catterall is boring, unanimously, Eddie Hearn probably shouldn't push Catterall so hard in my opinion. A lot of casuals or just people with a life that only tune into main events of cards like this will see Jack Catterall and he's just going to put them off. So get him his final eliminator for the welterweight title or whatever you got to do, but just don't build the whole card around it. Stick him on Dave Allen's undercard or something. By the way, Turki Al-Sheikh tweeted about this Jack Catterall vs Harlem Eubank fight and called it a Jerry and Jerry fight, in regards to this whole Tom and Jerry talk lately. So Turki clearly wasn't happy with either man in this fight. Some people might hear this and be glad that Jack Catterall likely ain't going to get put on a Riyadh season card by Turki due to how boring he is. But personally, this may sound weird, but if Catterall is going to keep having boring fights, I'd way rather see him on a Riyadh season show, and whatever kind of boxing fan you are, you probably should feel the same way too. Well, you might tell what I'm getting at here as I've been talking about how Eddie Hearn ought to stop building cards around the guy, but okay, look at a very stacked Riyadh season card. Say Beterbiev Bivol 2. Here's the card on screen. Of course, that Parker Dubois fight ended up being Parker vs Bacoli, and Shakur Stevenson ended up fighting Josh Padley instead of Schofield. But anyway, that was a stacked night of boxing. But you could almost say that it was too much in a sense. Like, Boatsi vs Smith was an amazing opener, then Caballero vs Yang second up was an amazing fight too. Great comeback from Caballero, recovered from the knockdown to just brutalise Yang's body and take the Chinaman down. The action then continued to be pretty good for the most part for the rest of the night, and it ended in a great main event. Now, that was like 4.5 months ago, and you don't hear much about that Caballero-Zhang fight at all anymore. And with everything else that happened on the night, by the time you got to the co-main event, with everything that happened, Adames getting robbed and all that, the Boatsi-Smith fight and the Zhang Caballero fight would have both been distant memories. You probably forgot about them as Joseph Parker was coming out to the ring. So yeah, when you've got such an eventful card, then things do become forgetful that shouldn't really become forgetful. I don't know, maybe it's just that we're not used to having the privilege of having such good cards. But yeah, so me personally, the fight on the card that was most forgettable was Ortiz versus Madrimov. So let's say you have a card that's stacked, and you stick what? Jack Catterall versus Shakram Giyasov for the vacant WBA interim welterweight title on such a stacked Riyadh season card, and that Catterall-Giyasov fight winds up being a stinker, yeah? It could be a nice little breather from all the good action. You could use it as a time to reflect on the two great fights you just saw, and to look forward to the next fights, and kind of just zone out of that Catterall fight. So let's say on this specific card, we put that Jack Catterall fight in place of Ortiz vs Madrimov. It will be the little come down from the Boatsi vs Smith and the Caballero vs Zhang fights. Then you can rest your attention span and get ready to lock in and score Adames vs Shiraz 119 to 109 to Adames. But now, when you keep building these little Manchester cards around Jack Catterall, yeah, it was a decent night of boxing all round that we just saw, but a card is meant to climax at the main event, which is the highest level fight between the two biggest names on the card. And we hope that it can be at least semi-decent in the way of entertainment, so it doesn't mar the experience of watching the entire card, and you can actually credit it as a good card all round. Of course, Beterbiev Bivol is a great climax to a card, and you ain't getting that every week, or every month. But let's just say that exact Beterbiev vs Bivol 2 card only had a decent main event instead, like a Crawford-Madrimov type joint, you could still feel good coming out of that card. But when the main event is an actual stinker, you just feel so underwhelmed coming out of the card. Even if the card had a massive upset on it, had a big anticipated pro debut on there, and had a really decent scrap on there, which this Catterall Eubank card did, of course. I watched this undercard from the start of the prelims, the Niall Brown fight at 5:30 PM, and I had a lot to say about the undercard, but I can't even really be arsed now because of how that main event went down. So basically my point is, I probably stressed this enough, I'm not going to prey on Jack Catterall's downfall just because I find his fights boring, but I have no life so I watch his fights like I have no choice. No, just stop building cards around the guy. Come on Eddie, what's really in it now? Unless these ticket sales from the Chorley faithful amount to way more than my estimations conjure up. I'm not going to lie though, I will say now, if Jack Catterall lost to Harlem Eubank, then I was ready to write Jack Catterall off completely. 2 losses in a row may not always be the end of the world, but it is when you're that boring, I'll be real. You only get popularity through merit if you're boring. Apart from your support from the Chorley faithful, I guess. And the reason I say that any type of boxing fan should have this same logic about having Catterall in the middle of a big Riyadh season pay-per-view as opposed to building another whole domestic show around him is because look, imagine if you're a little boxing nerd who sits at home on a Saturday night binge drinking tea and watching all the fights. Whether you're a content creator like me or you're just a die-hard fan who interacts with boxing comment sections online, during the Catterall stinker in the middle of the stacked card, you can be on your phone or laptop a bit, either talking to people in comment sections about the fights you just saw before it and the fights that are coming up, or if you do content, you can start writing your script about an earlier fight or plan what you're going to say about it, who a guy should be fighting next or whatever. Oh, and let me add the degenerate gamblers in the mix too, who sit alone basing the evening on trying to make money on a boxing card. Great way to go. If Catterall is boring you, then you could cook up some accumulators for the next few fights or something. And now, if you're a casual fan, or if you just happen to be at a social event or a family function on the night of such a card, but it is on TV, that being a stacked Riyadh season show, that Catterall fight could be a chance for a smoke break or a chance to go buy more drinks or have a chat or whatever. Actually, that would suit a kind of hardcore fan who just happens to be at a social setting on the night of such a card. Again, if we imagine Jack Catterall versus Shakram Giyasov as literally being on that Beterbiev Bivol 2 card in place of Madrimov versus Ortiz, in theory, So on that Beterbiev Bivol 2 card, you were probably ignoring all your relatives and friends or whatever, and you were just locked into both Buatsi versus Smith and Caballero versus Zhang, being totally unsociable. But let's say such a Jack Catterall fight was on next, then when you see where the Catterall fight is going, you can tell that the action is not going to pick up. You can wind down a bit and go and have a bit of small talk with everyone for an hour odd and then get back to being unsociable for the next fight. Are you guys sold on this idea? Because man, I just hate boring main events, because whatever the card is, I will lock into the main event, so I don't want it leaving a bad taste in my mouth. Last week Friday, the Wilder vs Herndon main event. Boy was that fight bad in every way. Wilder didn't look dangerous at all, looked terrible, but Herndon was just there to survive and run about and duck down and grab onto Wilder's waist. The stoppage in the end was underwhelming as well. That stuff just gets you out of the mood for boxing. Obviously for someone like me, I'm going to lock straight back in, but it's not like that for the average fan. Man, I feel sorry for anyone who does actually have a social life, but they didn't have plans this particular Saturday night, so they thought, oh yeah, I'll just stick on the boxing and give it a watch. Then they were sat there watching Harlem Eubank being all cagey and not knowing when to enter range, watching Catterall not push the action, and watching the two guys tumble about on the floor. That's the stuff that literally puts casuals off of boxing. And remember, we need casuals. There are way more casuals than hardcores in this world, so it's the casuals that make the sport bigger. And this is especially in regard to the domestic scene here, as Catterall keeps headlining these UK cards. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a casual right now. Wait, I am a casual, but just a casual with a social life. So I'm used to getting my drink on with the lads and doing some yayo on a Saturday night, chirping up some birds and maybe getting some action. But the weekend that I don't have any plans happens to be the weekend of the Jack Catterall fight, and I'm sat here like a mug on my 17th cuppa with my knob in my hand watching Jack Catterall and Harlem Eubank rolling around on the floor and thinking, how does anyone watch this on a weekly basis? No way I'm tuning into the next Matchroom card. Alright, I can't lie, I can't completely neglect to mention anything about the undercard after waffling about fake scenarios regarding watching a Jack Catterall fight in a social setting for that long. But I guess this is the dumb shit on the forefront of my mind after watching the crappy fight like that, so yeah, sorry. So William Crawler, the Matchroom boy, came in as a 1-25 favourite in what should have been a standard win against the Scot Fraser Wilkinson, who has been stopped twice in the past and he's never beaten anyone decent. But Fraser Wilkinson came in and stopped Crawler for the upset win. Dropped Crawler hard in the 5th round, then stopped him on the feet in the 6th. Crawler was all bugging out at the referee after the stoppage, but you don't do yourself any favours when you look at the ref after getting wobbled. That round 5 knockdown from Wilkinson weren't against the run-off play, by the way. In the fight, anytime Crawler opened up to throw shots at Wilkinson, since early in the fight, since the 1st round, Wilkinson would counter and land on Crawler, mainly with nice straight shots. And when Crawler was in front of Wilkinson in a high guard looking for opportunities to throw, Wilkinson would just piece Crawler up and break his guard. So yeah, Wilkinson really got the better of Crawler there. That's 2 shows in a row that a Matchroom boy has lost their O. Obviously it was Galal fight the other week in the main event, got smashed about the place by that essay for 12 rounds. Then the 18-year-old Leo Atang, the next AJ, made his pro debut to start the main card as he stopped a cab driver in there. You need a win in your debut, of course, but the optics of this fight just proved that boxing is more of a business than a sport. One guy is literally guaranteed to win. We've got live dogs like Fraser Wilkinson from the fight just before, of course, but this guy here, boy, again, it's just part of the game though, innit? Fair play to Atang for going down to the body and dropping the guy with a body shot, but as for that stoppage on the feet after, not that the cab driver had any chance of winning, but I get a sense that the ref stopped the fight there just so Atang could get the round 1 stoppage. I reckon the cabbie could have survived that onslaught personally. Anyway, I do sound awfully negative here. At least Atang got the stoppage on his debut, unlike Delicious Ori, who was a heavyweight amateur star that Queensberry signed, and in his pro debut the other month, he got taken the 4-round distance against a guy who was a cabbie and all, and Ori looked terrible in there. Then Delicious Ori actually retired from boxing not too long after making his pro debut. He never had the makings of a varsity athlete, that Delicious Ori. So yeah, regardless of the hopeless competition, at least Leo Atang actually got the guy out of there and won. Oh, and Atang is 18 but Ori is actually 28, a decade Atang senior. So even if Atang had a performance like Ori, there'd still be room for improvement. Matchroom love the little 18-year-olds though, don't they? Who's that little thick thing they've got? T or whatever she's called. Sweet little thing, ain't she? Yeah? Yeah. Pat Brown, he was back in the ring after fighting just 2 weeks ago on the Galal fight undercard, and he got the 1st round stoppage here. Standard. Pat Brown's 3-0 now with 3 KOs. I was excited to see Brown get a quick stoppage win again tonight, and he didn't disappoint me. And I like how he's being fast-tracked in his pro career and all. 2 of his opponents thus far have had winning records, and even in his pro debut he fought a tough Argentinian. Yeah, you know them tough Argentinians. And Brown's already on scheduled 8-rounders just a few months into his career. I do actually have a good bit of hope that Eddie Hearn will speedrun this guy to European level within the first year of his pro career, rather than just pad his record up for a couple years. And Hearn's actually already talking about Pat Brown going up against the Commonwealth Cruiserweight champion Alois Jr., which is great. Let's just have it now and rush Pat Brown to the top. Brown just stopped a guy in 1 who Alois Jr. took 3 rounds to get rid of, so yeah, there's the bragging rights there, in favour of Pat Brown. So yeah, maybe just give Pat Brown one more rando, then put him in there with Alois Jr. for the Commonwealth strap. Let's have it. Aqib Fiaz versus Alex Murphy. This was a fun scrap. I actually thoroughly enjoyed watching this, but I don't really have much else to say and I'm getting on long, so let me just leave it at that. Good fight. Joe Cordina made his return in the co-main event. His first fight since that stoppage loss to Anto Kakachi over a year ago now. That fight in which he lost his super featherweight world title. And this fight just now was Cordina's return to lightweight. He was meant to be fighting at lightweight in October for Shakur Stevenson's WBC title, but that one fell through. So Cordina fought some random Mexican guy, but we know that don't always go well for matchroom guys, such as Galal Yafai the other week. And due to Cordina's inactivity and the fact that he got stopped in his last fight, I kind of sense an upset here. When the opponent started walking out to I was like, yeah, this essay is about to cook Cordina. But no, Cordina just ended up getting a kind of standard 10-round decision win to shake off the ring rust. The opponent did look dangerous though, so Cordina did have to be on point. Cordina won the WBO Global Lightweight title, and they were talking about him fighting the winner of Abdullah Mason versus Sam Noakes, the vacant WBO World Lightweight title fight. And you know what? If the winner of Noakes versus Mason ain't going to be in a unification first after winning gold, which I do doubt they will be, then give Joey Cordina the shot, why not? And then after the Cordina fight on the card, we had the main event between Harlem, Eubank and Jack Catterall. Whatever happened there. But yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and you've been listening to O.M.E. Boxing.